I spent 20 years raising my stepdaughter, but when she got married, she let her rich deadbeat dad walk her down the aisle instead of me. This story is about my daughter, Genevieve, Jen, as we call her, but before I get into why I'm telling it, I need to explain a little about our family dynamic. I'm 54 now, and my wife, Melanie, is 49. We've been married for 20 years. I met her through work, we were co-workers, and I'd known her for a while before we got together. Melanie has always been one of those genuinely good-hearted people, the kind who makes sure to talk to everyone on the team, even though she was going through her own struggles. We all knew she was married, but she never shared much about her home life, and none of us ever pried. Looking back, I wish I had. Maybe I could have helped her sooner, spared her a few more years of misery. The reason I married Melanie might not sit well with some folks today, but back then, I did what I thought any decent man would have done. You see, Melanie had been married before, and it was nothing short of a nightmare. I won't go into every ugly detail, but she got married young, and it turned out to be a disaster in every sense of the word. I still remember the day everything changed. That morning, she came into work a little later than usual. I was the first one to see her, and right away, I knew something was wrong. She looked drained, defeated, and worse, I noticed the bruises. She was doing her best to keep to herself, but I made sure to check in. After some coaxing, she finally opened up and admitted that she'd been trapped in an abusive marriage for years. Her husband, let's call him Elliot, was a drunk, a complete piece of garbage who hurt her in every possible way, both physically and financially. Hearing all that made my blood boil. I asked why she hadn't left him yet. She told me it was because of her daughter. She couldn't afford to give her a decent life on her own, and she was stuck. I suggested she file for divorce. At the very least, Elliot would be legally required to pay child support, but she broke down crying. She didn't even have enough money to cover the legal fees. Seeing her like that, something inside me snapped. I knew I had to help her get out of that hell. Over the next few weeks, we put together a plan, and soon after, I asked her to marry me. The truth is, we didn't love each other then, and we both knew it. But we made the decision because it was the best way to get her and her daughter out of that situation. And honestly, it turned out to be the best decision of my life. Now, 20 years later, I can't imagine my world without her. I love Melanie more than anything, and I know she feels the same about me. Her first marriage is nothing more than a faded memory now, and I feel honored to be the man who got to make her happy again. The only good thing that ever came from her first marriage was Jen. She may not be my daughter by blood, but from the moment I married Melanie, she became mine in every way that mattered. I've always seen her as my own, and I always will. Melanie and I made a choice early on. We weren't going to tell Jen the full truth about her biological father. She was 5 when Melanie and I got married, so she understood I wasn't her real dad, but at that age, it was easy to build a bond with her. According to the custody agreement, Elliot had visitation rights on the weekends, but after a couple of months, he just stopped showing up. Jen would ask about him, and we never really knew what to say. Melanie had to practically beg him to at least see her once a week. After a lot of pleading, he finally agreed. For a while, he'd pick her up on Saturdays, take her out for a few hours, and bring her back after dinner. It wasn't much, but at least it was something. Then, when Jen turned 6, even that stopped. The visits ended. The child support payments stopped. Elliot completely disappeared from her life. It wasn't until later that we found out why he had a new girlfriend, and apparently, that was reason enough to stop being a father. Explaining his absence to Jen wasn't easy, but over time, she adjusted. By then, she and I had already formed a strong bond, and all I wanted was to be the best father I could be for her. I went to every school event, took her and her friends on playdates. Honestly, between me and Melanie, I was probably the more hands-on parent. Even Melanie would joke about it. But I wasn't doing it out of obligation, and it wasn't just to make things easier for Melanie. I did it because I wanted to be Jen's dad. One day, completely out of the blue, Jen started calling me dad. I can't even put into words how that felt. It was the happiest moment of my life, like I had finally done something truly right. To this day, nothing compares to that feeling. Jen was, and still is, my daughter in every way that matters. I never thought of her as a stepdaughter. She was simply mine. For the longest time, I believed she felt the same way about me. I thought I was her father, not just some guy who stepped in. But now, I'm not so sure anymore. Melanie and I built a good life together. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. We lived comfortably, went out a few times a month as a family, took vacations, and did all the things a typical middle-class family does. Neither Melanie nor Jen ever seemed unhappy with what we had. But when Jen turned 16, everything changed. By that point, it had been 11 years since Melanie's divorce from Elliot and a full decade since he had last seen Jen. And then, out of nowhere, Elliot reached out. He said he wanted to apologize to Jen for being a lousy father and make things right with her. I didn't trust it. Not for a second. Elliot had been an abusive, unreliable scumbag, and I didn't want him anywhere near my daughter. But supposedly, he had turned his life around. He had cleaned up his act, and he wanted a second chance. So we set some conditions. Supervised visits only, at least for a while, until we felt comfortable. The first meeting went surprisingly well. Elliot was on his best behavior, and Jen, to my surprise, handled the whole situation with a level of maturity I wouldn't have expected from a 16-year-old. Maybe too much maturity, if you ask me. But since she didn't seem to mind seeing him every now and then, we let it continue. The problem? Elliot had made a lot of money by then. Through investing and trading, he had built himself a fortune. And he started making up for all those lost years the only way he knew how, with expensive gifts and lavish experiences. Stuff I could never compete with. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. Because no matter how much I had given my daughter, no matter how many years I had been there for her, I could never give her that. At the end of the day, all I ever wanted was for Jen to be happy, and for a while, I told myself that's what mattered most. What I didn't realize, though, was that all of this, the money, the gifts, the sudden reappearance of Elliot, was having a real impact on her. Slowly, she started acting differently. It became clear that she valued the extravagant things Elliot gave her more than the everyday life we had built together. At first, I brushed it off. She was just a kid, after all, and what kid wouldn't be drawn to shiny new things? But what I failed to see at the time was that this wasn't just a passing phase. It was becoming a part of who she was, a way of thinking that would follow her into adulthood. When she turned 18, Jen told me she wanted to become a hairdresser. I was thrilled for her and wasted no time enrolling her in a cosmetology course. She worked hard, really hard, and I couldn't have been prouder when she earned her degree and landed a job soon after. But that's when things started to change. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was busy. Starting a career is no easy feat, and I wanted to respect that. I believed her when she said work was keeping her tied up, and I gave her space. I missed her, though. I missed the way things used to be, just the two of us hanging out. But I kept those feelings to myself because the last thing I wanted was to make her feel guilty. She was carving out her own life, and that's exactly what I had worked so hard for. But over time, it became obvious that this distance between us wasn't just a matter of a packed schedule. She was pulling away on purpose. I tried reaching out a few times, even straight up asked her if I had done something wrong. But she never gave me a real answer. We weren't exactly estranged, but we weren't close anymore either. I guess that's just how life goes. Kids grow up, and sometimes, they drift away. But it hurt. A lot. She was our only child, and I never expected things to turn out like this. It wasn't just me, either. She even put some distance between herself and Melanie, though Melanie wasn't as worried about it as I was. We both agreed not to push. The last thing we wanted was for her to feel resentment toward us. No matter how much it hurt, her happiness was more important than our feelings. What I didn't know was that while she was too busy to come home, she had no problem making time for Elliot. Jen is 25 now. 2 days ago, she got married. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, a lot of drama unfolded, and I reacted in a way that was completely out of character for me. Now, to be clear, Jen and her fiancé, Trevor, paid for their own wedding. I was fine with that. I had no expectations other than getting to be there for my daughter on her big day. But then, just a few weeks before the wedding, Jen told me something that hit me like a ton of bricks. She said that while I was an important part of her life, she didn't want me to walk her down the aisle. That crushed me. I had dreamed of that moment for years. I had no other children, no other daughters. This was something I had really looked forward to. But I tried not to let my disappointment show. Instead, I simply asked her why. She told me she thought the tradition was outdated and patriarchal, and she didn't believe in it. I respected her decision. I told her I'd be there for her in whatever way she wanted me to be. Then, 2 days later, I found out the truth. There was going to be a walk down the aisle. But it wasn't going to be me. It was Elliot. Trevor let it slip by accident. He wasn't supposed to tell me, but once he did, there was no taking it back. The damage was done. I went straight to Jen and asked her if it was true. At first, she denied it. But when I wouldn't let it go, she finally admitted the truth, and the reason behind it broke me in a way I never thought possible. She said she chose Elliot because he wasn't some middle-class nobody like me. I don't think I've ever felt a pain quite like that before. It wasn't just that she chose him over me, it was why she chose him. Trevor tried to smooth things over. He pulled me aside and said that it wasn't really Jen's fault, that his family was full of snobs, and she was just trying to fit in. But I was done. I thanked Trevor for trying to cover for her, but I made it clear I wasn't coming to the wedding. He told me it would devastate Jen, that she really did love me, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let her disrespect me like that anymore. I think Trevor understood where I was coming from because he didn't push. That night, I drowned my sorrows in whiskey. I don't even remember most of what happened. I told Melanie everything, but I also told her I needed space. I don't know what she did after that. All I know is that I blocked Jen on everything and sent her a final message. From that moment on, there was no relationship between us. I don't know if she ever responded. I don't even have the heart to check. She got married yesterday. I wasn't there, of course. But early in the morning, I got a call. It was from her friend's phone, which is probably the only reason I answered. Jen was hysterical. She was crying so hard that I could barely understand her. Over and over, she kept saying that Melanie had told her she wasn't coming to the wedding either, and she never thought it would get this bad. I didn't say a word. She just kept sobbing, telling me she had screwed up, that she needed me to come fix things. When I finally got her to explain what had happened, I almost laughed at the irony. Elliot showed up drunk, not just tipsy, sloshed. And instead of behaving himself, he went straight over to Trevor's parents and made a complete fool of himself. Now, the whole reason I wasn't allowed to walk Jen down the aisle in the first place was that I supposedly wasn't sophisticated enough for Trevor's family. But here was Elliot, the man she chose instead, making an absolute spectacle of himself in front of the very people she had been trying to impress. It was so bad that Trevor's parents were now saying they wouldn't even attend the wedding. Jen kept trying to explain, sobbing through the phone, but I couldn't make sense of half of what she was saying, and honestly, I wasn't all that interested. She had hurt me in a way I never thought possible. I had spent my entire life doing everything I could for her, putting her needs before my own, making sure she had the best life possible. And in return, she saw me as nothing more than an embarrassment, someone to use when convenient and discard when she was done. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to draw the line somewhere. I had to protect my own dignity. So when she begged me to come and save her, I told her no. That's when she lost it. She started screaming at me through the phone, saying that if I didn't help her now, then I was no father of hers. I took a deep breath, steadied my voice, and said, I thought I wasn't your father anyway, given the way you've been treating me. Then, I hung up. 15 minutes later, she called again from the same number. I didn't pick up. Instead, I sat there, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't remember the last time I had cried that hard. I wanted to be there for my girl, I really did. But she had taken my heart, torn it from my chest, and crushed it underfoot as if it meant nothing. And for the first time in my life, my self-respect wouldn't let me keep crawling back. But now I don't know if I did the right thing. Maybe I should have gone. Maybe I was too harsh. I have no idea what happened after that. I haven't reached out to anyone, and Jen hasn't tried to contact me either. And now, all I feel is confusion. Did I abandon her when she needed me most? Have I made a mistake I can't take back? Edit. A lot of people have asked me why I have such a deep hatred for Elliot, even after all these years. If you've never had your heart ripped from your chest, spat on, trampled into the dirt, and tossed aside like trash, then you wouldn't understand. If you've never been abused by someone who was supposed to protect you, you wouldn't understand. Elliot is the reason my wife suffered through years of torment. I will hate that man until the end of time. I don't care if it's been a decade or if he's supposedly changed, none of that matters to me. Because of him, Melanie lived a nightmare. And no, I will never be the bigger person and forgive him. Not in a million years. Call me petty. Call me bitter. Call me whatever you want. It makes no difference. And in the end, Elliot proved exactly why I never wanted him near Jen in the first place. On the day of the wedding, he showed up drunk. Not just tipsy, falling over himself, slurring his words, completely wasted drunk. And before he even went to see Jen, he decided to introduce himself to Trevor's family. Jen didn't know he had arrived yet. She only found out about the disaster he caused after the damage was done. In his drunken state, Elliot started flirting with Trevor's mother. Right in front of Trevor's father. And not just a little playful banter, he was hands-on. From what I heard, at first, everyone tried to ignore it, hoping he would get a grip. But things escalated quickly. Trevor had to step in and physically pull Elliot off his dad's coat because the man was so wasted he was practically draped over him. And that's when Elliot lost it. He started yelling loud enough for the entire wedding party to hear, demanding that Trevor let him go. Trevor kept apologizing to his parents, but it was too late. The scene had already been made. Then, things got really bad. Elliot turned to Trevor's father, Dustin, and, out of nowhere, accused him of being a hypocrite. He shouted that if Dustin was allowed to cheat on his wife, then she should be free to do the same. Dustin's jaw dropped. He told Elliot to shut up, but Elliot just kept going, making an absolute spectacle of himself in front of everyone. And that's when the truth came out, at least, Elliot's version of the truth. Apparently, Dustin has been cheating on his wife with multiple women for years, and she knows all about it but pretends not to see it. Why? Because at this point in her life, she's too dependent on him to leave. She tolerates his affairs in exchange for the comfortable, privileged lifestyle he provides. And whenever they fight about it, he just buys her gifts or whisks her away on fancy trips to smooth things over. I have no idea where Elliot got this information or if it's even true. But that didn't matter. Because by the time he was done screaming about it, the entire wedding party knew. It was a disaster. He started pulling at his hair, beating his chest, acting like some kind of tragic hero. Then, for reasons I still don't understand, he decided to physically start a fight with Dustin. It didn't last long. Dustin landed one punch, and Elliot, being as drunk as he was, collapsed onto a table full of guests from Trevor's side of the family. At that point, the entire wedding had turned into a train wreck. Guests had arrived just in time to witness the meltdown. Trevor's parents were mortified, completely humiliated in front of their extended family and friends. They were so ashamed that they were on the verge of walking out of their own son's wedding. And that was when Jen called me. She begged me to come and fix things. And I said no. By the time our conversation ended, Elliot and Trevor's parents had already left. Trevor chased after them, trying to convince them to stay, but it was no use. Some of the guests from Trevor's side walked out too. They're probably going to go no contact with Jen. And honestly, I don't blame them. The wedding was a complete disaster. And Trevor? Trevor is furious. He hasn't been speaking to Jen, and she's miserable. He even told her that she should consider herself lucky that he went through with the wedding at all after her father caused such a massive scene. Now, here's the thing, Trevor has always looked out for me. I've always had the feeling that he never wanted Elliot in Jen's life, let alone at the wedding. But I don't know that for sure. That's just my own speculation. What I do know is that Jen sent me an email detailing everything that happened. She apologized for her behavior. But the apology came with a condition. She told me that I should have come when she called. That as her father, it was my duty to be there, to take her side, and to help smooth things over. And now I don't know what to think anymore. I haven't responded to Jen's email, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. I have plenty I could say, but what would be the point? She wouldn't understand my side of things, nor would she care about how I feel. So, for the first time in my life, I need to put myself first. She's hurt me enough, and now, it's time for me to step away and protect my own peace. Melanie has completely cut her off as well. She didn't go to the wedding, and when Jen sent her an email too, she didn't even bother opening it. I doubt she ever will. She's been my rock through all of this, and yet, it's ironic, because she has lost her child too. I've thought about at least sending Jen a short message, telling her I need space and that I'll reach out if and when I feel ready. But as of now, that's all I can offer. And honestly, I don't think I'll be updating anymore. I want to close this chapter and move forward. Every time I let my mind wander back to what happened, I feel like slamming my head against a wall. I grieve for what our family was and for where we went wrong as parents. But maybe, just maybe, this is karma playing out. She was so worried about Trevor's parents not liking us. So worried that she chose Elliot over me because she thought he would fit their mold better. But in the end, he humiliated her on the most important day of her life. And when everything fell apart, it wasn't Elliot she ran to. It wasn't Trevor's parents. It was me. Update 1. For those of you expecting some dramatic twist, I'm sorry to disappoint. No jaw-dropping events have taken place. And for those who were hoping Trevor would leave Jen, that hasn't happened either. They're still together. I have no idea if they're having issues, and frankly, I don't want to know. That's between them, and I have no intention of intruding on their lives. I'm not welcome there anyway. Even if I were, I wouldn't want to be. I've done my duty as a father to the best of my ability. And now I'm taking a step back. I almost responded to Jen's email. But after sitting with it for a while, I realized something. Even if I tried to set boundaries and ask for space, she'd just twist it into blame and criticism. It wouldn't make a difference. So, I stayed silent. On a brighter note, I've joined a local biker club. We meet once a week for drinks, and I've made some new friends. They're younger than me, which is kind of funny because I've become the dad of the group. They use dating apps and come to me for advice on the women they're talking to. It's surprisingly entertaining. Melanie, meanwhile, has picked up knitting. We're both making a conscious effort to enjoy this phase of our lives. In fact, I'm planning something special. We never had a honeymoon when we first got married. And now, I think it's time to change that. I feel a little nervous, if I'm being honest. I've never done anything like this before. But it's also exciting. For the first time in a long time, I have something to look forward to. I have my wife. I have a social circle. I have a life. Would I rather have my daughter in it? Of course. Would I rather have my family back the way it was? Without a doubt. But we don't always get what we want. And I need to make peace with that. Update 2. She said yes. Melanie and I are finally going on our honeymoon. When I told her what I had planned, she had tears in her eyes. We're going on a month-long road trip, just the two of us, driving wherever the road takes us, soaking in the freedom we never got to enjoy when we were younger. We had originally set aside money for Jen's future children, if she ever chose to have any. But after everything that's happened, especially the way she's treated me, Melanie and I have decided to spend it on us instead. There's been no further attempt from Jen to reach out. And honestly, I think this is how it's going to stay. If this is how things are meant to be, then so be it. I'd much rather use my hard-earned money to give my wife and myself the adventures we never had. We spent our entire adulthood working hard, making sacrifices, pouring everything we had into giving Jen a good life. And in the end, she didn't see it. Or maybe she did, she just didn't appreciate it. Either way, that chapter is closed now. She has her own life. If she ever has children, she can raise them however she sees fit. And if she ever needs help, well, she's got a father for that. My services are no longer required. It hurts. But I'm excited for what the future holds for Melanie and me.